Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we are unpacking Chapter 6 of the Qualitative Research Syllabus, specifically for the doctoral students over at University Hashizeka. We're going to dive into a methodology that, honestly, can fundamentally transform your entire qualitative research journey. So let's get started.
If you're doing qualitative research right now, you've probably stared at a massive mountain of transcripts, interview notes, and focus group observations, and asked yourself that classic, daunting question. Basically, how on earth do we make sense of all this data? It's chaotic, right? It's completely overwhelming. You've got literally hundreds of pages of people talking, and your job is to somehow turn all that raw human expression into rigorous science.
Well, the escape route from all that chaos is actually a highly structured journey. We start with the raw qualitative data, we break it down into manageable little pieces called codes, and then, through a lot of careful comparison, we elevate those codes into big, meaningful themes. It's a fantastic, clear process for transforming raw data into brilliant insights.
To make sure we cover everything you need for the syllabus, here's our quick roadmap. First, what is thematic analysis? Second, the paradigmatic dimension. Third, distinguishing it from other methods. Fourth, qualitative versus quantitative analysis. And finally, the steps in the coding process.
Okay, Section 1. Let's define the core method. What exactly is thematic analysis? At its absolute core, thematic analysis is a method used for identifying, organizing, and interpreting meaningful patterns, which we call themes, within your qualitative data. And I really want you to notice that key word, interpreting. This isn't just basic description or summarizing. You are taking highly subjective experiences, perceptions, and ideas and structuring them into scientifically meaningful categories.
For every doctorante, every single doctoral student tuning in today, especially those of you pursuing a PhD in business and economics, this level of analytical rigor is absolutely mandatory for your thesis. Because thematic analysis is so incredibly flexible, it can be applied across all sorts of research fields, giving you the analytical depth and conceptual interpretation that a doctoral level demands.
Moving right along to Section 2, the paradigmatic dimension. This is all about epistemology and ontology. So, here's a crucial thing to remember. Qualitative analysis is never just a perfectly neutral, purely technical procedure. It's deeply influenced by your worldview. If you're looking through an interpretivist or constructivist lens, your focus is heavily on understanding subjective meanings and how reality is socially constructed. But if you switch to a pragmatist lens, your analysis totally shifts. You're looking for themes that solve practical, everyday problems and generate real-world implications. So, how you identify themes depends entirely on the theoretical perspective you bring to the table.
And because of that subjective element we just talked about, you, the analyst, have to be completely reflexive. You must be deeply aware of your own role in how things are interpreted, maintaining total transparency between your core research question, your chosen paradigm, and the analytical process itself. That is the true backbone of scientific rigor. You have to be able to show everyone exactly how you arrived at your conclusions.
All right, let's jump into Section 3, distinguishing from other methods. We need to build some clarity here.
Let's start by clearly separating what we're doing from grounded theory. While they might look kind of similar at first glance, they have very different end goals. Thematic analysis organizes and structures content into conceptual patterns, sure, but it doesn't necessarily try to build a brand new theoretical framework. Grounded theory, on the other hand, relies on constant, systematic comparison of data specifically to generate an entirely new formal theory from the ground up.
We also need to be super clear that we are not performing discourse analysis either. Discourse analysis treats language itself as a social practice. It examines how discourse actually shapes identity, power dynamics, and social relationships. Thematic analysis doesn't treat language as a mechanism of power. Instead, it's just trying to identify the conceptual meaning behind the participants' experiences and perceptions.
Section 4 already. Let's talk about qualitative versus quantitative analysis and those big methodological divides.
To really ground the difference here, think of the qualitative world as microphones and focus group clipboards. It's all about capturing human voices and stories. The quantitative world, on the flip side, relies on charts, calculators, and statistical metrics. Thematic analysis lives firmly in that qualitative realm, capturing those deep conversational insights, rather than just crunching numbers or counting frequencies.
It is so incredibly vital that you don't confuse qualitative thematic analysis with quantitative content analysis. Quantitative content analysis is obsessed with objectivity. It uses numerical coding to just measure how often communication elements pop up. It literally just wants to know how many times a certain word was said. Qualitative thematic analysis has an interpretive soul. We are diving way down into both the manifest, the obvious meaning, and the latent, hidden, underlying meaning of the text.
And finally, Section 5, Steps in the Coding Process. Let's look at a concrete, step-by-step roadmap. Following the very famous model by Braun and Clark, the progression works a bit like a recipe. Step 1 is familiarization with data. This means intensive, repeated reading, just totally immersing yourself and reflecting on the material. Step 2 is initial coding, where you roll up your sleeves and do open coding to label the basic semantic units of the text. And then Step 3 is moving to preliminary themes, where you start grouping all those little codes into much broader analytical categories.
Now that initial coding phase, it is highly meticulous, hands-on work. You're basically taking mental highlighters to text and picking out basic units of meaning. And because you're going to end up with codes that are numerous, fragmented, and super detailed, researchers almost always rely on qualitative analysis software, like ATLAS.ti, for example, to efficiently organize everything, manage thousands of tags, and start building those early thematic structures.
But here's the amazing payoff. All of that incredibly fragmented, zoomed-in work eventually leads to a beautifully structured thematic hierarchy. You transition from this chaotic mess of individual virtual sticky notes into solid main themes that reveal interconnected patterns of meaning. Honestly, this is exactly how a rock-solid analytical argument is developed at the doctoral level.
And with that, you have successfully navigated qualitative analysis. You've taken the pure chaos of human data and brought absolute clarity to it. But as we wrap up Chapter 6 today, I have to leave you with a bit of a provocative teaser for our next explainer. Are you ready for economic modeling? Because in Chapter 7, our focus completely shifts over to advanced quantitative research. The big question is, can your findings actually hold up when we introduce complex numerical modeling? Well, keep studying, keep analyzing, and I will see you in the next explainer to find out.